Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Steve Down. This is my guitar. If you're just joining us, this is the 7th episode in a study looking at 4 on 6 by Wes Montgomery. We've looked at the head and we've also looked at 5 choruses of the solo so far. And today is the 6th chorus and it's all about octaves today. The entire thing is in octaves. If you've just stumbled onto this channel, what we do here is we take a tune and take it apart completely and learn from the various concepts that the soloist or artist used within the track or solo itself. So that could be harmonic, rhythmic, melodic, or something more conceptual. So we take those things and then learn from them. I give you a few examples of me using those ideas. And all of the transcriptions are shown on screen, but you can find downloadable versions and also the backing track I created myself with my friends Joe Harris, Jamie Sefton and Matt Carter, all over on Patreon. The link is on the screen below. And there you'll find all of the transcriptions, all of the chord and scale packs, all of the backing tracks and anything else from any of the other series that is on my channel and some extras there too. I'd just like to say a big thanks to all my patrons that have been supporting me. There's loads of you now, which is great. And I'd just like to thank the ones that have signed up in the last couple of weeks. So thanks so much to John, Christopher, Ronnie, Huen, Matt, Tridon, Eeyore or Ior, Christopher, Salvador, David, Ingmar, MP, Michael, Vivian, Matthew, Christoph and Henry, who joined I think yesterday or this morning. So thanks, big thanks to you guys and also to all of the rest of you for supporting me on this channel because it helps me keep going. If you want to support in more of a one-off fashion, there's a buy me a coffee link below, or you can just hit the like and subscribe button and don't forget to leave a comment as well because I love interacting with people about this stuff. Especially if there's a bit of a different view, is always really, really good because it helps me to be able to sharpen what I know and also helps me to be open-minded to what the soloist might be thinking. So do leave a comment below. Let's get cracking. I've broken it up into 4 4-bar chunks. So here's the first chunk of 4 bars. Okay, so Wes is using octaves for this. So very, very brief introduction to octaves. Octaves, I'm sure you know exactly what they are theoretically, but essentially it's the distance between the root note and the root note that is an octave higher. And so what we do is we play them both together. Okay, and there's a couple of different ways that you can play octaves. The best way of playing them, I think, is to play with the octave note in front rather than behind, because obviously you can play it like that with, I'm on a D here, and you can play with the D in the bottom there and the D in the top, and the octave is behind. I always find that a bit tricky because you're across more strings, and also it's difficult to kind of then move to the upper octaves. So I prefer to have the octave in front, which is like this. And there's a lot that has to go into this to make it not sound like this. Okay, so there's a lot of muting that has to go on here, and the way that I mute, everyone's ever so slightly different, so do kind of mess around with this to find out what suits you. But the way that I mute for octaves is that I let my first finger and my fourth finger, I use my fourth finger by the way rather than my third, it's just more comfortable for me with my hand shape. I let my first and fourth finger be a little bit lazy, so rather than being right up on their tips, the fingers are kind of pulled back a little bit, and this side of the finger and this side of this finger here are touching the strings below it, so that kind of mutes. So my first finger is muting the fourth string, and then I've got my fourth finger on the third string, and then my fourth finger, I use my fourth finger by the way, it's just more comfortable for my hand shape. My fourth finger is actually muting the second string underneath that, and then my first finger here, the butt of my first finger down here, is muting the first string here, and then I've got my second fingers and third fingers just kind of like both laying on that bottom string there, so I can actually strum through the whole thing. Obviously try and be accurate and kind of go from the fifth string, but I do actually go from all of it here. I've got a fairly loose right hand when I'm doing this, but it is kind of honing in, it's isolating in on this kind of area, so I don't really go from here or anything like that. It's mostly kind of just just above the sixth string here, and then I go down through to the scratch plate, and that's kind of as far as I get. It's purely because I need to obviously bring my hand back up, and if I go down too far, then I'm probably going to miss the correct beat to come back in on. So that is essentially the technique of octaves. Obviously that is one shape of the octaves, which is 2 strings 2 frets apart, but that works for these 2 string sets. But for going down to the 4th and 2nd and 3rd and 1st, you need to be further apart, 2 strings and 3 frets. And that's why I use my 4th finger, because then I know that I'm using the exact same fingering for both. So doing something like this, with what I'm doing here, is a good way of practicing your octaves. It's just a good way, you can do that with a metronome, but it's just a nice way of practicing your octaves in one kind of position. And then you can go through and do an exercise basically where you're kind of doing something that's more in context of the piece that you're doing. So for example, you know, we're in G minor here, so maybe a G minor 7 arpeggio, so something like this. That is essentially it for octaves. It is quite tricky because you do have to kind of maintain a certain hand shape to make sure that you've got, you know, a nice kind of fluent line, and that you're not accidentally kind of going to 2 frets rather than 3 frets. And also then when you end up kind of going across string sets, then it becomes even more tricky because you've got to bring your fingers back in and go out again. So it's going to be muscle memory. So it's going to be repeating that movement, which is why I think doing something like that is really going to help you to be able to get that muscle memory of the hand shape in your left hand. So in this first 4 bars, Wes is obviously using octaves, but he's using pretty much G minor pentatonic vocabulary. But there are some notes elsewhere in the piece where he's actually using some natural minor and Dorian vocabulary. So what I'm giving you here is the G Dorian scale in octaves, starting here in 5th position. Here it is. The other thing to kind of look at as well is the fact that Wes uses, he's got a very unique slide into notes. Sometimes it's very deliberate, it's like that, which is kind of has a rhythm attached to it. But sometimes it's extremely quick, like that. And it also almost kind of doesn't have a rhythm to it. Classically, that's known as achiacatura, or a grace note, or a crushed note. On the transcription, I've literally just put a slide in there because sometimes he plays it really crushed, and sometimes it actually does have a slight value to it, albeit a very, very quick value to it. So just for ease sake, and I'm sorry for all the purists, I've literally just put a slide line going into it, and I would encourage you to use your ear to kind of figure out how quick that line is there. But Wes, you know, not necessarily in this piece, but Wes has been known to do this kind of lick where he'll slide into one and then slide out into another note. And it's something that George Benson's lifted, definitely. So in this example that you're about to see and have a go at, hopefully, I've used the pentatonic in octaves and also this slidey idea that Wes uses quite a bit. So here's that. The other thing to mention here is Wes's incredible phrasing here as well. Note the repetition of G to B flat, and then the answering phrase, and then another answering phrase after that. This is such a great technique to have in your solo in vocab bag. It draws the listener in, and it just creates a story with your melody. So I definitely encourage you to use that in your soloing and your playing. Okay, let's move on to the next 4 bars. So we're in that cluster of 2-5-1s, the crazy cluster of 2-5-1s again. So for those of you who haven't seen, it's a 2-5-1 in B flat major, but we don't hit the B flat, and then a 2-5-1 in A flat major one in G major, and then one in D flat major. Okay, and the way that Wes is kind of viewing it here is he's basically kind of, for the most part, ignoring the 2 chord because it's going by so fast, and he's actually referencing the 5 chord here. So to help you with octaves, obviously we've approached this with single note melody. To help you with your octaves, here are all of the 5 chord arpeggios, so the 5/7 arpeggios for each 2/5 in octaves. Here's that. And then here's an example of me using that idea, and I've used at the end a few outside bits and pieces. So over the top of the D7 chord, I've used a flat 9, so an E flat, and then also a sharp 5 over there as well. And you can use that. These extensions, altered extensions as we call them, work really well over the top of dominant chords, and Wes uses this quite a bit. So this is something that's actually kind of lifted or just inspired from a different solo. The last lick that I've put in there, which is an augmented 7th lick, is lifted completely from Wes, and he uses it quite a lot, that, and he does it really, really fast. And it is a tricky lick there because you're having to go from that 2-string 3-fret string set octave to a 2-string 2-fret octave. So that is tricky, so you might want to slow that down and practice that slowly beforehand, but I just thought I'd sneak it in there because it is a cool little Wes lick. Okay, let's take a look at the next 4 bars. Okay, so these next 4 bars, really, really simple. Things to kind of like look at are firstly the fact that it's D minor pentatonic, which is a bit crazy because you'd think, well, why are we using D minor pentatonic when we're in G minor? That's a bit weird. But the reason why he's using that is because it brings out some of the extensions. So it brings out the 11th because of the C there. So you've got D, which is the 5th, C, which is the 11th, and then A, which is the 9th, G, which is obviously your octave or tonic, and then F, which is your flat 7, and then obviously back to D. So nothing's really going to clash there at all, but it just brings out those extra extensions, so the flat 7, the 9, and the 11. So it's a really good thing to be aware of this. So here is the D minor pentatonic scale in octaves for you to practice. And then here's an example of me using that D minor pentatonic scale in octaves over the top of this G minor to C dominant chord sequence. The other thing to note here is Wes's swing, which is incredible, and it's mostly created by this kind of staccato followed by an accent on the crotchets. It's such a simple rhythm. It's just 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4. But because he's accenting on the 2, and then the classic Wes slide at the end there, it's just such a swinging line there. And so it's the first kind of each group of those 2 there. It's kind of almost brushed. And it's extremely quick, so you can see that in my left hand, my fingers are kind of pulsating to give that muted. Because it's not staccato as in me muting it in the right hand, it's the left hand that's basically deadening the note. So do give that a practice as well. And then let's have a look at the last 4 bars. Okay, if any of you have looked at the D Natural Blues solo that I transcribed and unpacked, I think last year it was now, don't think it was 2020, you'll see that there is the incredibly fast strumming, up and down thumb strumming that Wes does for the octaves. And he's got a similar thing here. It only happens once. It's on the note of B flat, like that. And that's literally what he's doing there. It's just down, up, down, up. It is quite tricky to do, and it does kind of require short nails, because otherwise you will get the nail kind of caught as you come up, or at least in my experience it's like that. And it is difficult to kind of get the velocity, what I call the velocity, which is the dynamics of the strum, to kind of accent on that last one and on the first one. So do practice it as you kind of go through, but I do it slowly to begin with. But yeah, Wes does this. I mean, this is only a tiny tiny bit of what he does in D natural blues, so do check that out if you want to have a bit more of a go with it. But essentially the vocab over these last 4 bars is just literally still it's G Dorian. He starts on the B flat, on the flat third of G, just to give that bluesy kind of nature. And it is kind of on the 1 to begin with, so that little strumming pattern comes in just off of beat 4, and then accents on the 1, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So you've got to make sure that you get in the right, on the right beats for that one, and they're all slides as well. 2, 3, 4. And then after that, it's literally just some more vocab, all from the G Dorian there, and that's really offbeat there, which is really, really nice. Just another thing to kind of think about, you know, another concept to use within your soloing, another rhythmic concept to bring you into the next chorus. It's a really, really nice kind of rising tension line, and then resolves onto a tense note, which is nice because then obviously he's going to resolve that in the next chorus. So that is pretty much it for this solo. There's a lot to get through, even in just one chorus. Obviously, we've got quite a few more choruses to go. Definitely get your octave chops up, because there's more octaves coming. Work on that slide that's on there. Work on your G Dorian vocab on there, and learning your 5/7 arpeggios in octaves as well, for that crazy 2/5 junction that's in the middle of this as well. If you want to get all of the transcriptions and any of the exercises that you've seen on screen and the examples, then go over to Patreon. The link is on the screen, and you'll also be able to get the backing track there as well, and anything else that you've seen on this channel, it's all on there. And then obviously don't forget to sign up to the Facebook page if you've become a patron. It's a closed group just for patrons, and you can all socialize there and also see some of the things that I might put up there from time to time. And until then, happy practicing and have fun. Drop a comment if you've got any questions, but apart from that, I'll see you next time. Bye.